and I'm here today with Mr. James W. Oakley Jr., who is probably well known enough that if you're looking at this video, you'll recognize him. I've always called him Mr. Jim Oakley, but he's not the first Jim Oakley, and we're going to talk a little bit about his family history today and talk about the history of the Centreville Press. I know you're not a stranger here, Jim, but welcome to the Centreville Press.
Thank you. Glad to be back. I see a lot of familiar things around here.
Yeah, I know you do. And I'm going to test your memory today and see how much you remember about some of these things and how how this place used to work. As you know, we have been in the process of moving towards a digital age, which is something that didn't exist during the time that you were active with the press. And I want to talk a little bit about how hard it was to keep the printing presses operating around here and keep the newspaper published every week during the period of time that you were here. Now, I do know a little bit about the history of the Centreville Press, and I have an idea, and I want you to give me the actual numbers that you recall, that your dad acquired the Centreville Press in about 1927, somewhere in there. Is that right? Let's start there. What do you know about the acquisition?
Well, I really don't know a lot about it, except the story I always heard was my grandfather, who was deported with G&O, and probably at $75 or $80 a week, made more money than anybody in Brandon Center.
That was a good payday back then.
Yeah, and he had a falling out with the publisher of the paper here over politics. It was a Catholic thing. They had a Catholic running for president, and he was opposed to that. And I don't know whether he was the clerk to KKK or not, but he had, most of his followers were, and most of the people were. And so he just fell out with him, came up here and says, "We'll just buy this paper." Trouble. And so he said, "I got it if you want to buy it, so much money." So he scraped around, got the money up, and bought it. And he immediately knew he had to have somebody run it. My grandmother had graduated in English from Montevallo, University of Montevallo now, and she was well versed in writing. Writing was her big thing. So he went home and told this story I always heard. He called her fat lady.
He called his wife?
Called his wife fat lady.
Okay.
So we went home and told her, said, "Fat lady, get your clothes on, get some new clothes. You editor of the press." This was at lunch one day. And that's the story I always had.
What was her name?
What's that?
What, your grandmother? I know your grandfather was O.C. Oakley. Right? Ollie Oakley.
Yeah.
And what was your grandmother's name?
She was, gosh, I can't remember, Mike.
Okay. Well, if it comes back to you, throw it out.
Yeah. Lizzie.
Lizzie. Okay.
Elizabeth. Addie Elizabeth was her name. We got some grandkids named after her.
Okay. So she is the first editor under the Oakley administration.
That's it.
Right?
That's it.
You weren't born at the time, right?
That's right.
What year did you come?
35.
1935. So, do you recall or have any general knowledge of how old your grandfather? How old was your dad at the time in 1927?
He was probably 17, 18, about 19 or 20.
Still in his teens, essentially.
Late teens.
Okay.
Or maybe early 20s.
So how did he get involved in the operation of the newspaper?
Well, he came in and he was hauling scrap iron. He was a scrap iron dealer, as you probably read from that thing. And he got in here and decided if they're going to run this thing as a family. They had to soup up their typesetting a little. So he went to New Orleans, went to linotype school.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget how long he went, but they taught him how to operate a linotype, how to got his speed up. He could set type, and he went back to the linotype school for another month, I think it was, and learned how to repair. So he was the maintenance man and operator as well.
Okay.
And somewhere in there, the work got heavy, and he sought out to find some help. So he found a linotype operator from, I forget the name, Marvin Hewitt,
Mm-hmm.
Who had worked somewhere else but had wanted to change jobs. And the word was traveling through the grapevine that there was a linotype operator, which was a rare breed. So he contacted Marvin and hired him, and I guess he worked here for 30 to 40 years.
Was Marvin Hewitt from here, from Bibb County originally?
From Chilton County.
From Chilton County. So he came back. He came here and settled, and he's got descendants here now.
Right.
Yeah. So I remember him when I was growing up. I didn't know he worked for the press that long.
Yeah, he was here forever.
Yeah.
For years.
Well, did your father eventually take over the management, the total management of the paper, or did your grandmother stay with it?
Pretty quickly, yeah.
Okay.
Managing this thing wasn't her cup of tea. So she loved to write and go to meetings and meet with the ladies and so forth. That was her thing. So she quickly shoved the operation off to him.
Well, English teachers don't make good business managers.
That's right.
All right. Well, I know there's been, we want to talk a little bit about the mechanics, how the press got printed back in those days. I know that, again, that was before your time, but you mentioned linotype. What kind of a printing press did the newspaper have at the beginning in the 20s when your grandfather took it over? You would know that?
It was printed on a roller outfit. They laid paper down on top of this type,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd roll it on a roller, and it would imprint.
So each paper was rolled by hand then?
That's it.
Okay. So I heard something about mechanical presses being at the press at some point in time, and them being operated in the basement of the old press building because of the noise.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't be the press you're talking about. They're probably the
No.
generation before
The
that.
press he bought, that was he bought a 2-page press,
Okay.
a used one. I don't know the history of that, but he brought it in here, printed 2 pages at a time, and that required the paper to be flipped over and printed on the back, too.
Mm-hmm.
So later acquired a 4-page Mealy. Mealy was a big press maker in those days,
Mm-hmm.
and could print 4 pages at a time. So you could we used to run 4 pages at a time, stack the papers up, and run them back through and get 8 pages out of 4 pages, and it was hand fed.
And you had to feed them back, same paper back through the
Same
press.
paper back through, and
Twice.
then we later bought a folder. That was early in my days, and we used to have.
Well, let's go back to your time at the press. I want to talk about some of the things that you remember the most about things that happened during the time you were running the press. I know one of your favorite stories, or one of the stories that you were deeply involved in, was identifying that boy that was killed in a wreck up at River Bend in the 60s. And I know you spent many years following that story, but I know there are other things that stick in your memory. There were important stories that you covered during the time that you were managing this newspaper. What can you call up in your memory back about some of the most important stories?
Well, one of the biggest stories I ever got involved in was the Jamie Meigs murder.
Yeah.
When these two drug addicts coerced him in the drugstore under the guise of buying something. And he went in, he let them in, went back in there to the pharmacy, and that's where they told him to get us stand aside, I guess. And he came out and tried to beat him, I guess. But anyway, they shot him, killed him in the drugstore. And that search went on for months. Finally, they found him.
That was in the 50s, I know, probably 57.
Yeah.
That sound about right?
Yeah.
And he was the owner and pharmacist of what we still...
He and his sister, Louise Rogan, owned Meigs Drugs. He was a Meigs.
Right.
They owned the drugstore.
Mm-hmm. So eventually they caught these guys. Were there two of them convicted of the murder?
Well, there was two of them involved, and one of them committed suicide in jail the night before the trial.
Mm-hmm.
The other one went on the trial and escaped from jail and stole our district attorney's car, which is parked out front. I assume left the keys in it and got away. And he was later killed in an attempt to rob a liquor store in New Orleans.
Really?
And the police killed him. So anyway, they buried over here in East Alabama, somewhere over there. I forgot the name of the cemetery, but that was quite a deal. The jury, the court was scheduled that day, and the jury had been assembled, and we're up there in the courtroom. And one of the deputies came over and says, "This fellow has killed himself in jail, hung himself." And so everybody was ready for court. Here he was over here hanging. And so they went ahead and tried the other fella and sentenced him to life, I guess. I can't remember the details, or death or whatever. But anyway, he escaped here and got away and got killed in New Orleans. But that was quite a lengthy thing. It went on for months.
Did he escape from the Bibb County jail after he was convicted?
No, they went ahead and had a trial. I went ahead and had the first one was convicted.
Okay.
He was sentenced. He was sentenced to electric chair. The second one was at large. They went ahead and had a trial for one of them.
Okay. While the other one, while they were still looking for him.
They were looking for him, and they looked for him for months, several months, before he turned up.
Do you remember who the sheriff was at that time? Was Harold Daly the sheriff then?
No. His wife was read the draft office over here. She was a subtle. I can't remember him.
Well, it'll come back to you. Well, what other stories do you remember that stick out in your memory?
Well, the construction of the bridge down here was a big story.
Replacing the Cahaba River Bridge?
Yeah, replaced the old Cahaba River Bridge, which was an old two-lane bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in high school when this took place. We were practicing football one day, and they were crossing the river with those huge beams that are holding this bridge up now.
Right.
And I never forget, we were out there practicing, and of course our attention was watching all that going on too, but they swung one of those beams out over the river, and there was a guy standing on it holding the cable, directing them, and the cable broke. and the beam fell about probably 100 feet into the river. He just flopped off to the side. He was okay. He came out all right. But
He survived that? He survived that fall?
oh, he survived it. He just, when he started down, he just pushed off to the side. He landed, the beam landed here, and he landed maybe 20, 30 feet away from it. And the football team watched it all. But anyway, that was interesting to watch that bridge being built. That was the biggest construction project around here in forever. And then one of my, another big story was our big sturgeon that was caught here.
Right.
In the river. That was a phenomenon. As a matter of fact, in my files at home, my home, I still have copies of all that. And for years, I had people write me or call me and says, we heard there's a big fish called Centreville. And I'd send them a copy of that. When I finally got a copy machine, that came out and got popular, so I could just run them off a copy of the story. And but that was a big story, the sturgeon that came up here.
Well, when you grew up here, Centreville was, what do you recall as being the most important industry and the most important thing that affected the economy and the development of the Centreville area?
Well, of course, the lumber industry was huge here. And I remember when Simon and McGillner, garment people, came here and located a plant.
Mm-hmm.
And later became health techs. Now that was the savior to this part of the country. They worked about 450 people and brought this place to life, to tell you the truth. Really did.
Was this after the lumber industry began to decline, or was it simultaneous with lumber?
Simultaneous.
So we had two big industries: the garment
one time,
garment plants and the sawmill business at the same time.
Of course, coal has always been big in this county, north end of the county.
Right.
Seemed like Shoots Creek was a dividing line. I don't guess there was a piece of coal south of Shoots Creek.
Yeah, sounds right. Well, were you involved any with the period of time covering the news about the breakup and sale of the Belcher Lumber Company? You remember anything about that?
I was here, yeah. I remember when it all happened. That was the biggest court case in Alabama for years. Millions of dollars. Because they own so much lumber, so much timber, land.
Mm-hmm. Well, what effect do you think that's had on this with the closing of that operation and the scattering of all the assets? They're all gone now. What effect do you think that's had on the county and the community?
Well, the county survived and got stronger. We got into other things, more industrial stuff, and overall we came out better.
Well, you've had 30 years of teaching journalism and probably 30 before that of running a newspaper. We're now moving into a period in time where even the oldest newspapers like us, they're I think I read this week that in the last decade we've lost over 2,500 newspapers nationally, printed products. I don't know how many Alabama has lost, but I know it's a considerable number. The Centreville Press has been the only publication to survive since the 21st century. there's no other printed newspaper in the county.
No.
Hadn't been for a long time. And we still have people who insist on a printed newspaper. I'm talking about older folks in general want a printed newspaper. Younger folks don't seem to want a printed newspaper. They'd rather get their news online. But older folks...
On the telephone.
Yeah, older folks have not changed their habits. But I just wonder what your thoughts are about the future of printed newspapers as we get this now almost 2025. That's been a long time since you started in the newspaper business in 1960 or 58, I think it was.
Yeah.
So that's been 40, 60, that's over 60 years ago when you first started. So what are your predictions about the future of the printed newspaper?
Personally, I feel like the future of printed newspaper, there will always be a limited number for whatever reason. But I think as far as being a big deal is gone. Electronics got it, TV, radio, and what we got here, you know.
Right.
Can I ask Jim, I know that technology has changed the world that we live in entirely. My life has been changed by the electronic revolution that we've been under for probably 40 years.
Yeah.
How do you think it has affected journalism and the importance of the journalistic paradigm that once existed? Do you think that we will ever see the value of true journalism come back to the value that it once had, let's say 40, 50 years ago?
No. I have been extremely disappointed in the fact that now they don't teach honesty and integrity in the journalism business. I know when I taught journalism at Alabama, and I told those kids, I said, if you can't prove it, don't print it. You know, if it doesn't turn out to be the truth, don't use it. But now that's all gone.
Well,
If it shakes the bushes a little bit, use it. You know, they do. If it creates some attention, you can always correct it the next issue. But that was not the way I was brought up, and in my life I've been disappointed that has transpired into that.
I would agree, and I would think that it probably has played a major role in the demise of the respect that we have for our leadership at this day and time.
Well, it has.
Our nation has never been more divided in my lifetime than it is right now, and I think a lot of that falls in the area of the demise of professional journalism.
I agree. Some of these guys couldn't survive if it was like it was in the old days. I mean, they'd ride them out of town on a rail.
Well, in the last 2 years, and more so in recent months, we've had exposure now to artificial intelligence and its ability to write theme papers, PhD theses, and newspaper articles. Artificial intelligence seems to be being used to do a lot of things
Yeah.
that used to require a considerable amount of training in the School of Journalism before you were able to produce a comprehensive, well-prepared article. I wonder if you've had any exposure to or have had a chance to observe articles that have been generated using artificial intelligence and have any comments on that.
Well, not really. I was raised up one way and have seen this thing change. to artificial intelligence. And I kind of have lost interest, to be honest with you. And the point that I don't believe half what I read, half what I see. And that's something that never existed when I was coming along. If it was in print, you could count on it. You could put money on it. Because somebody down the road wrote that thing or produced that script that their reputation was riding on it. Now, they say, well, if it's not right, we'll correct it tomorrow. Well, you know, it wasn't any correcting it tomorrow in my day. You did it right the first time, or you didn't do it. I know one of the hardest things I ever had to do was tell a student in class, he says, I think I've got a scoop here. I said, you think? Think is the key word. I says, would you put your life on this? Well, no, I think I've got it on good terms. I said, think. I said, tomorrow we'll know whether it's truth or not. Tomorrow is okay. You know, just wait one more day and find out if it's truth or not. And so I had a lot of people, a lot of times in writing stories or chasing down leads on stories, one day would change the whole thing, because it wouldn't turn out just like we thought it was going to. And so, but they don't care now. They'll shoot and come back and do it again if it's wrong.
Shoot now, apologize later.
Yeah. I hate that. That has ruined the quality, well, the confidence that people put into journalism.
You know, I'm impressed with you and your career and the things that you've done. And I know you're fairly well known at the university and in university circles for what you did in the area of journalism. And I know you had the important opportunity to be at the university when our governor stood in the schoolhouse door. So those stories are all important things in your life, I would imagine.
Yeah. And when Arthur and Lucy came in, I was there. The first black.
Yes, sir. And what was the guy that always ran for governor every year?
Shorty Price.
Shorty Price. You remember Shorty Price?
Sure.
Did Shorty come to Centreville?
No, he was. Did he come to?
Through Centreville?
Oh, he stopped down here every time he came through. At Buck Wallace's grocery store. Oh boy! Right where the new
where the Taco Bell is.
Taco Bell. Yeah.
Well, there was a bus stop down there at one time too, wasn't it?
It was over across the street.
You know, I saw a photograph recently, Jim, that fascinated me because I had never even considered it. But it was a photograph that was of the taxi cab service that was down here at the Belcher Motor Company. That's where all the cars were. And I think they had 8 taxi cabs.
I don't remember that many, but we also had a service up here at the end of the block by the drugstore. That was a parking lot. But Jackson family had some cabs there.
Well, it fascinated me because I had not considered the fact that in that particular day, there wasn't that many people had automobiles.
That's true.
And if they wanted to come to town, they either had to walk, ride a horse, or get a cab.
A cab, that's right.
So cab and taxis were very important for that period.
Taxis were big business when I was young.
Apparently it was, more so than I realized.
Oh, yeah. I know Raymond Freeman, who was a big industrialist around here, industrious person, ran a taxi service.
I believe it was his cars that I saw in that photograph.
Yeah.
Probably framing motor parts, frame a cab. I remember that. Well, Jim, this has been a very entertaining and informative conversation. We really appreciate you taking your time out to come up here and sit down with us and tell us some of these stories and talk about the press. And we appreciate the contributions that you've made in the newspaper business and the history of Centreville and Brent and Bibb County. So thanks for all the things that you've done. We appreciate it.
Sorry I couldn't remember more, but the years have gotten to me more than I have ever thought they would. So
There is a lot of weight pulling on folks as they get older.
it is. It is.
Well, the good part is you don't have to remember all the dates, but you remember the events, and
The events is what I remember, yeah.
that's right. Well, thank you again for coming.
Thank you.